Okay, thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited about this. This is my first time hosting a webinar. All right, I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Susan Light. I'm a certified dog trainer. I live in Los Angeles with my husband and our 2 cats and 2 dogs. I do behavior consultations for dogs and cats. So that's things like aggression, resource guarding, litter box issues, etc. I host a podcast called Doggy Dojo. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and from season 2 on, it's on YouTube. Season 5 is going to launch very soon, starting this year. So if you'd like more free information from me, make sure to check that out. If you're local to Los Angeles, I teach obedience and tricks classes for the West LA Obedience Training Club. My January classes are full, but they're ongoing. So we'll be starting a new session in about 6 weeks if you're interested in that. I do private one-on-one sessions locally in person or virtually all over the world. And new this year, I'm offering a monthly membership. So what that is for $20 a month, you get access to an educational webinar like this once a month. And members will have access to all the past webinars recordings, be able to submit questions in case they can't attend live, and be able to recommend topics for future webinars. So tonight's webinar that I had prepared was originally going to be about pet insurance because I get a lot of questions about pet insurance. So I put a webinar together for that. But with the fires going on, I just felt really strongly that this topic was more important to discuss right now. And I also wanted to make it available for free for everyone. So, this is going out unrestricted right now. It's going to go on my YouTube unrestricted after when it's recorded. But if a monthly webinar about dog training topics or cats, if subscribers are interested, I would love to talk more about cats as well. If it's something that would interest you, that's live on my website now. I priced it very inexpensively because I am really passionate about getting good information into people's hands and about improving animal welfare. And that's why I do the podcast, why I keep that totally free. And I felt like this was a good opportunity to add a very low cost option for people to go really in depth and get direct access to me as well. So I did want to mention those things. Sorry. If you want to reach me, you can follow my Instagram or check out my website or email me. That information is all on that first card there. And we are moving on to the next one. So disaster prep, we're going to discuss how to be more prepared for disaster if you have pets. So we'll focus on a couple of scenarios. Depending on where you live, you're at risk for different disasters, but it doesn't really matter the disaster. We're looking at the result for you and your pets. So it's going to be either evacuation, meaning you need to leave your home, or shelter in place, meaning you can't leave your home. So sheltering in place may or may not be accompanied by outages to your services like power, water, and internet. So I just want to acknowledge that my source is ready.gov for most of these things. It's been a major resource, and I've downloaded some PDFs from that site, and we're going to put links to them in the chat at the end so that you can just download them and have them as references. I'm also going to pop them as downloadable links into the YouTube notes. So if you're watching this recording on YouTube, you can download them from there. And that's so you don't have to feel like you need to sit here and take notes. This is a lot of information. These are handouts with the preferred information on them, and you can just have them to refer to and get started. So this whole presentation is really a condensed version of what's on their site, and then adding my pet perspective as well. So they identify 5 steps that they phrase as questions to ask yourself. So how will I receive emergency alerts and warnings? What is my shelter plan? What is my evacuation route? What is my family or household communication plan? And do I need to update my emergency prepared kit? So let's go through these one by one. How will I receive emergency alerts and warnings? Number 1 is communication. How will you know there's an emergency going on? Thankfully, this is one area where the fact that everybody has a cell phone is going to be really helpful. The cell phone companies can use your physical location and alert people only in the areas that are in danger. And all of these alerts come through your cell phone, similar to a text message. I'm sure you've all gotten one, like an Amber Alert or a Silver Alert, or something like that. So we've been getting them in LA. If you're actually in an evacuation zone, you get a push notification. Somebody accidentally sent one to everyone in Los Angeles, and everyone panicked for a minute, but They really normally are very good at going out to just the people in the areas that are affected. So the thing to know, though, is that it's not really your most detailed source of information. It's really just an alert. It's really just to get through to you that there's something going on. So you're going to probably need to find out more somewhere else. So here in LA, we've learned about an app called Watch Duty that has been giving us really up-to-date information about the fires. So that's really specific to wildfires. But FEMA has a mobile app, so you can download that. And then obviously there's also your local news, radio, or television can be your best source to find out what's going on. And if you're not sure what language these alerts mean, like if you don't know the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning, FEMA has a PDF on all of those explaining that, and that's one of the ones that I've gathered for you. So what is my shelter plan? First concern, shelter. I'll touch a little bit on mass care shelters, which is what they call when you're evacuated. If you have nowhere to go, this is the place where you can go and have shelter and other resources. But it's sometimes can be hard to know where your nearest shelter is. So you can search for open shelters by texting the word shelter and your zip code to 43362. Now, obviously that's here in the United States. I know at least one person here is not in the United States, so that's probably not going to work for you. And then also you could go to disasterassistance.gov to see where the shelter is. It's really important to get accurate information. I live across the street from a city park that has a senior center, and the senior center was listed as a shelter, but it was a mistake. I went across the street to offer to volunteer, and they were like, we're not a shelter. And people were like dropping donations and resources and things that then the city government employees had to move to the real shelter. So now there's a big sign being like, we're not a shelter, we're not taking donations, and it's lists the nearest shelter. So, you know, everyone's human, the wires get crossed, but it's good to get the information from the best source, save you some time in these emergency situations. So that's if you get evacuated and you don't have somewhere to go, you want to find that mass care shelter. But you might not be evacuated. You might be told to shelter in place. So that means you have to stay home, stay inside, bring your pets and children inside. If the disaster involves poor air quality, which a lot of them do, you might want to turn off your HVAC system so it's not pumping the outside air into your home. You can plug up under your door with a damp towel, and you could even seal your windows with plastic sheeting and duct tape if you have some in your garage or in your disaster kit. That's going to be on the list. We'll talk more about what you want to have on hand in those situations when we get there. But, you know, if you are expecting to need to shelter in place, try to charge your devices and keep them charged, and charge any extra power banks you've got while you can, in preparation for if you lose your power. Maybe fill some pitchers with water, or your bathtub with water if you're concerned about losing your water. A lot of these places affected by the fire are on boil water watches, so they can't drink the water, but at least it's still flowing. Your internet can also go out, which makes having power on your phone even more important, because you might need that data to communicate. Or cell towers can go down, and then maybe you have to use your internet to communicate. And remember, you can always message through another app. There's Signal, which is encrypted. There's WhatsApp. You can maybe reach out through Instagram and Facebook. So prepare for losing any of those services and think about what your alternatives might be. What's my evacuation route? So this one I think is a little bit tough, because you never know what's going to happen and how it's going to affect how you're going to get out. But especially if you have pets, it's really important to identify multiple options ahead of time, so that if some of your options go away because of the specific thing that's happening, you have other options. Because a lot of the public shelters and hotels don't allow pets. I do know that some of the hotels are making exceptions now, but you should prepare for a situation where there's nowhere available that the public offers that have your pets. So what they set up is an animal shelter where you have to drop your animals at the shelter, and then you go to the human shelter. So if that's what you have to do, that's what's available. But if you have a couple of contingency plans in place so you can take your pets with you, that's obviously going to be more preferable. So it's also important for you to check and make sure that the roads are open. Depending on what's going on, you may not be able to go your normal routes or the places you think you will. And I wouldn't rely on your map app to know the up-to-date road information. So you can go to, this is the one just for Los Angeles County, I put it up on the slide. They keep more up-to-date road closure information. So go to your Department of Transportation websites and things like that. If you're counting on a route, check and make sure that it's open before you go. And while we're here talking about evacuation, I want to talk about crate training. So if you need to evacuate your pets, you're going to wish that they were crate or carrier trained. So my dogs ride in crash tested carriers called sleepy pods in the car, and both of my dogs are crate trained. Now, I really love, there's a lot of talk about how in America we over rely on crates, and we shouldn't be crating our animals all the time, but emergencies are a big reason why I'm still pro crate training. And I think it's great to train it before you need it, so that you can go at your animal's pace and it can be a positive experience for them, right? So when we first got our littlest dog, Scarlet, we tried her in a crate and she was so anxious, and she actually damaged the crate. She's 7 pounds, so that's how anxious she was. So, I gave her some time to settle in. And once she realized she was safe, I started crate training her. And there's some photos here of that. So I thought I had some video for her, but I don't. So if you want to crate train as part of your emergency prep, we're not going to go super far into it or carrier training your cat, but I do recommend it. And I'm just going to give you a couple of tips right here. So you can sort of see in that first photo that she's just kind of like checking it out. In the second photo, she's inside. It's a little hard to see in the third photo because it's so small, but I leave the crate in the living room and she's just gone into it on her own over there for no reason. She's just like, "Mom, what's this?" Which is a great sign that, she's having good associations with the crate. And then in that last top picture, she's actually laying down and relaxing in the crate. And all of this is with the door open, before we're closing the door. And I think that's a big mistake that people make when they're crate training, is they close the door really fast. They're like, "Get in and close it." You really want, by the time you're closing it, for it not to really matter to the dog that it's open or that it's closed, because they're fine being in there. So, and it takes a little bit of time, but not that much time, to be honest. It really only took a couple of days. And now she's totally fine in it. You also want to pick the right kind of crate. So this is a wire crate. It's a pink wire crate, and Val has a blue one. But there are wire crates like this. Whatever crate you pick, it should be big enough for them to stand up, turn around, and lay down. It can be bigger than that, but it shouldn't be smaller. But there are also like hard-sided plastic crates and travel crates and crash-tested crates and things like that. Sorry, Scarlett does bark when she hears noises outside. It's just a fact of life around here. We're working on it. And then on the bottom, we have Mr. Valentino working on his sleepy pod, which is his crash-tested carrier. So when you zip off the top, that first one, it's just a bed, so he's in there in the first one. I do want to point out, those are not shock collars on their necks. Those are GPS trackers called Tractives. And yes, they are wearing clothes, but so, he's just in it there. The second photo, again, it's a little bit small, but he's chosen that bed over even another bed that's right next to it. So I know that he likes it. In the third one, I put the top on. So he is in there. He's climbed in there on his own with the top. And then I'm going to play the little bit of video for you. Of him just climbing in. And I didn't ask him to climb in. He just climbed in. This is, again, just before we even put it in the car, just giving them a lot of time to feel really good about it. And now he rides it in the car with no problem. So I think it's really important to crate train your animals or carrier train them, because if you need to evacuate, it's going to make it so much easier. Your pets will be so much safer, and it will be that much less stressful for them if it happens, right? Which I hope it doesn't. But so I think that's what? Is the video going again? How do I stop it? I don't know why the video went again. Okay. So next up, what is my household communication plan? So this is really important, and it's the first thing you can do. Take a few minutes to do this. If you have roommates or you're living with family members, you want to take some time and jot down everyone's information. I know it seems silly since it's all in your phone, but also because it's all in your phone, I think it's very possible that you don't have these numbers memorized. So I could probably come up with the phone number that was at my parents' house when I was growing up because I always had to give it out. That was my phone number. But I couldn't tell you either of my parents' current cell phone numbers off the top of my head. So write these things down in case your phone dies or you lose it or it's damaged. You want to be able to get in touch with people. So there's a really cool resource for this at ready.gov, and the link is right there. It's ready.gov /plan form. And basically it prompts you to put in everybody's information. It's also going to prompt you for your doctor information and your veterinarian information and your insurance information. You can designate an emergency meeting place in case you get separated. So fill out as much of it as you want to. And then you put in an email address and it emails you a PDF of it that you can just print out and have it. And I think it's really important to have it printed out in hard form because, again, if you can't get to your devices, something happens, you're just going to have it and it's going to be handy. So if you don't want to do that, you can just grab a piece of paper and start jotting them down. But this is a really cool resource that's already available. Do I need to update my emergency preparedness kit? Do you have an emergency preparedness kit? Let's make that yes as soon as possible. So this will vary a bit based on your personal situation, like if you have kids or you have pets or you live with a senior citizen or what disaster you're prepping for, if you're more likely to evacuate or shelter in place. So we'll start generally and you can zero in on some things more to specific situations. But I like that they phrase this as this question, do I need to update my kit? Because it acknowledges that it does need to be revisited from time to time. So I'd love to tell you that you're going to do this once and it's done and you never have to think about it again. But it's not really true. It's easier to update your kit than it is to start from scratch, but you should revisit it at least once a year. You need to make sure that the items in it have not gone bad, and also that that information that you gathered in the step previous is still up to date, right? So you can program a reminder in your phone to just go off once a year, be like, I'm going to check into my kit. That's an easy way to do it. You could tie it to an anniversary, like the date you bought your house or when your homeowner's insurance renews, something like that. But let's build our kits. So let's talk about the stuff that's really non-negotiable. So water, 1 gallon per person per day for several days. This is for drinking and sanitation. So remember that if the water goes out, your toilets are not going to flush and you're not going to be able to take a shower, et cetera, et cetera. So if you think a gallon of water per day seems too high, it's not just to drink. So food, at least a several day supply of non-perishable food. There is a picture there. I found that in Costco today. It's $63 worth of freeze-dried food. It's emergency food. It's exactly for the emergency kit. It's all freeze-dried meals. It's like 125. That would do it for several people for several days. It also, I don't know if you could see if it's too small, it has a 25-year shelf life. So that is one, if you just want to check it off. It's also in a big bucket, and we'll talk about those later. They're actually pretty useful in themselves in a disaster kit. So this is a cool option, but you don't have to do it that way. If you just want to gather non-perishable food, most canned food you can eat without cooking it. You do want to think about that. Like, is this something that if we can't cook it, we can still eat it? But yeah, canned food, you can do it that way. Just because it's non-perishable doesn't mean it will be appropriate. Like, I wouldn't pack pasta. How are you going to cook it? You use a lot of water, even if you can boil water. So if you don't have water. So, think about that if you're not going to just get a disaster kit one. And by the way, just like you can buy that emergency food, you can buy an entire emergency disaster kit already put together if you would like to. But flashlight and extra batteries. I know you have a flashlight on your phone, so you might not have a flashlight in your house, because if you need a flashlight, you probably just grab your phone for a second. But if the power is out, especially for a long period, you're not going to want to waste all of your cell phone battery on the flashlight. So just a standalone flashlight or two, or camping lanterns or something like that, it's going to be so useful, and extra batteries so that they can run as long as you need them to. First aid kit. We're going to talk more about the first aid kit in the next slide. But you need a first aid kit and any prescription medications handy. If you know something's coming, like it's going to be hurricane season and you live in a hurricane zone, or it's coming into winter, and you think you might have winter storms, you might want to get ahead of your prescription medications, right? Something that happens very quickly, like a wildfire, you probably don't have a chance to order extra prescription medication to have on hand, but you obviously want to take your prescriptions with you. Manual can opener if your kit has canned food. So one of the cool things about that bucket of freeze-dried food is they're all in pouches and you just rip them open and add water. But if you're going the canned food route, make sure that you have a can opener so you can get into it. An external battery for your cell phones. If you have one, they're not that expensive. They're pretty handy even when you're not in a disaster, but boy, it could be the difference between being able to use your phone still or not. A wrench or pliers to turn off the utilities. So when I was worried that I might have to evacuate, my family was like, leave your water on, but turn off your gas. And I was like, I don't know how to do it. So they told me how to do it. And they're like, you need a crescent wrench. So thankfully I have a crescent wrench. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't just have these tools as part of your emergency prep, you're going to want probably a crescent wrench so that you can turn off your utilities. A whistle to call for help. Okay, so I didn't come up with this list. This list is from ready.gov. A whistle to call for help just makes me think of Titanic when Rose was blowing the whistle. I don't have one in my kit, but it could be good, so maybe you want one. Moist towelettes and trash bags for personal sanitation. So coming back to the buckets, I know that classrooms now are giving teachers a bucket emergency kit. It's in a 5-gallon bucket. It's for active shooters, which is horrifying, but when they think they're going to have to shelter in place in their room, possibly. But basically, the bucket itself, they're instructed to use it as a toilet if the kids need it. So to put a garbage bag in it and use it as a toilet. So if you don't have water for a long time, those 5-gallon buckets can be kind of useful for things like that. But moist towelettes and trash bags also. Soaps, wipes, hand sanitizer as well. And then non-prescription medications. So there's a lot of those that you might want to have around. So again, this is not a list you have to keep. There'll be PDF later available. So let's talk about the first aid kit a little bit more. You can purchase human first aid kits already made. You can purchase pet first aid kits already made. Or you can purchase a human first aid kit and add some things to make it a also pet first aid kit. So, or you can build either from scratch. So must have gauze, nonstick bandages, self-adhesive tape wrap. And this is for taking care of wounds on fur because you can't use Band-Aids. You can't use anything that would just stick to the hair, right? So you put gauze, you nonstick bandage, and the self-adhesive tape wrap is like you get when you donate blood or you have a blood draw and they just wrap around. It doesn't actually stick to you. It sticks to itself. That's what you would use for a pet wound. So you'd want that in your pet kit. Hydrogen peroxide, not for cleaning wounds, for inducing vomiting if you had to. Antibiotic ointment or spray, hot spot spray, wound wash, styptic powder or pencil. Styptic powder or pencil, it stops bleeding. So like usually you have it on hand if you just are trimming their nail and they bleed so much if you hit the quick. It's a good way to stop it. So it's good to have for that when it's not a disaster, but it obviously it can help with other bleeding as well. Eye wash, scissors, tweezers, a soft muzzle that fits your pet and a cone that fits your pet. So I don't have time to really get into it, but scared, wounded animals bite or can bite. And so for everybody's safety, having a muzzle that fits your pet and obviously a cone that fits them to keep them from exacerbating an injury if they get one. Things that are good to have if you want to be more prepared: blankets or towels, Benadryl, Benadryls for allergic reactions, a flashlight, which is already in our human kit, syringes without needles. These are syringes for giving medication. So it's a syringe, there's no needle, you just jam the soft meds into their mouth. Rectal thermometer, latex gloves, instant ice pack. And then if you really, really, really want to be prepared for everything, you should have an extra leash collar bowl. I would say also like extra ID tag. That'd be great. They're not expensive on that extra leash and collar. Magnifying glass, if you're trying to see something that you're trying to get out of them, it can be helpful. A stiff card like a credit card for getting like bee stings out. Milk of magnesia and activated charcoal are for poisoning situations. Silver gel is an antibiotic, like antimicrobial topical gel, and then saline solution. So those are things that you want to put in your kit, add to your kit, make sure you have in your kit if you have a pet. And then continuing with our disaster prep, we have prescription glasses, contacts, and solution, baby supplies if you have kids, obviously, pet supplies, which we just talked about, cash or traveler's checks. I looked it up and traveler's checks do still exist. I'd probably go for cash though. It's really, somebody told me who had lived through the Northridge earthquake. They're like, when something on that level happens, you can't just get cash from the ATM. Like systems go down. So, and you can't always just go to the gas station and get gas either. So, you know, having your car gassed up, having cash can make things a little bit easier if you have a big disaster. Important family documents, copies of your insurance policies, identification, bank account records. If these are all saved electronically, cool, someplace you can get to them, or in a waterproof, I would say maybe even fireproof portable container. We call it the lockbox. It's like a bigger than a briefcase, but it's a supposedly fireproof box where all our important documents are. Sleeping bag or warm blankets for each person, complete change of clothing appropriate to your climate, and sturdy shoes. I've been hearing a lot of people give the tips of grab your laundry basket, your dirty laundry, because these are the clothes you wear all the time. They fit you. You don't have to think too much about it. Just grab all your dirty laundry. Fire extinguisher, on the other hand, matches in a waterproof container, and then feminine supplies and personal hygiene items. Continuing on, mess kits, paper cups, plates, paper towels, plastic utensils, paper and pencil, and then books, games, puzzles, other activities that don't take power to pass the time. So it's a really long list, right? And if you want to get all this together or not will depend on your personal situation. So what kind of natural disasters are you most likely to experience in your area? And do they most often result in an evacuation or a shelter in place, right? Because if you're sheltering in place, there's kind of no limit to the size that your kit can be. You can really stock up a lot in your garage or in your basement and just feel really good about it. But you're not going to be able to take all of that stuff with you probably if you evacuate. So you might want to think about like a small evacuation go bag, as we've all been calling it, and then a bigger stash for if you're staying. There's also sometimes, you know, how much time you'll have to evacuate. You might not get much time. You might just have to grab that one go bag and go. Or I know a lot of us, if we weren't in the initial fire zone and we've just been watching the fires for a few days, we've had more time to think about it and go through the house and pack things that we would like to take with us as well that, you know, those people did not get a chance to do. And you also wouldn't just keep your most important mementos packed. But it's an interesting thought to go around your house and think about, okay, like what can I not replace? What can I take? Like my cat's ashes and my wedding photos and, you know, things like that. So that's a little depressing, but that's the reality of being evacuated. So what if you have pets? So we talked a little bit about evacuating with pets and crate training, right? Pro crate training, do it gradually. But so have an evacuation plan, you know, have your crate set up, know where you can take them, know your options. But this one's really awesome, I think. Develop a buddy system. It's so important. So many people in the recent LA wildfires were not home when the evacuation orders came down. They were not allowed to go home and evacuate their pets. So it's really important to build a community near you so there's someone you could trust to call and get your pets out for you. You would probably offer to do the same for them, right? So it's great to have friends all over town, but it's so critical to have a connection with someone close to you. So here's your homework, right? Start chatting with your neighbors when you run into them on dog walks. Look if you see cats in other people's windows, not in a creepy way, but when we lived in a small 16 apartment building, a neighbor knocked on our door one day and said, you know, we saw you have cats. Can you feed our cats while we're on vacation? And of course we said yes. And then we became very friendly and, you know, we watched each other's cats when they were out of town, but they would have been my person if I was not home and vice versa to be like, grab our cats, you know, if we got to go. So, you can obviously make friends with a neighbor that doesn't have a pet and they could be your buddy, but you obviously have a bond with someone else that has a pet. So it's a great place to start, but it's a good reason to meet your neighbors. And I want you to think about that and build your community and get a buddy system in place. It's a good priority. Have your pet microchipped. So important. I feel really strongly about this. Every pet should be microchipped. Even my indoor only cats are microchipped. Identification will be vital to get your pets back with you if you get separated. So a lot of these people who didn't get to evacuate their pets, they were rescued, a lot of them. And there's a massive effort underway to reconnect people with their pets. So if your pet wears a collar with identification, that is fantastic. I think that they should, but it could get lost, it could get damaged. And a microchip is another layer of protection, right? So if you don't know what a microchip is, it's the size of a grain of rice. It's a little, it sends out a little radio signal that can be read by a wand that every vet has, and a lot of shelters have them, and a lot of the rescues have access to them. And the first thing they do if they find a lost pet is they're going to scan the pet with that wand. And if a chip comes up, you know, your information will come up and they'll be able to call you and say, we have your pet, right? So it's really, really vital. They're not that expensive. Some of them do require you to pay every year. It's very weird. I have 4 pets and they all have different brand microchips because they get chipped before you adopt them. So they all came from different places and they all got different chips. So some of them, it was literally a one-time fee and I've never had to pay again. And one of them I have to pay every year. But even still, I would rather have that because I know that they can get back to me if something happened. So microchips are not foolproof. They are inserted behind the neck, behind the head and the neck. So that's where people scan first, but they have been known to migrate. So if they're just scanning the neck, please ask them to scan the entire animal. I've also heard they shouldn't be scanned on the metal vet table, that can interfere with it. But, and I have heard horror stories of like a pet was chipped and they just couldn't find the chip. So I personally have my veterinarian check for their chips every time I have them there for their appointments. And they kind of look at me like I'm crazy, which I think is funny, but I was like, I just want to make sure that their chips are scanning. So boom, boom, they scan. That's great. And I did have a client who we had this conversation and she took her dog in and they couldn't find his chip and she just had them put another chip in because you want to be able to get reunited with your pet if you're separated in a disaster or any reason, but it happens a lot in disasters. There's a lot of animals that are displaced that we're trying to get back to their families. So microchip your pet if you have not. And then it's very important to keep your information up to date. So if you move, or especially if you get a new phone number, make sure to contact where your chip is registered so that's up to date. Contact animal control for more tips. FEMA recommends this if you have any more questions, like if that doesn't get you covered, you can contact animal control. If you have a complicated situation, if it's a lot of animals, large animals, the horses all had, here in LA, all had to have different plans. Exotic animals, you might want to loop in animal control if you're not sure what to do. This is pretty focused on dogs and cats because that's what I know. So if you have other pets and this doesn't help you as much, you can reach out to animal control. I would do it ahead of time before the disaster is happening because you're going to get a lot more information. So your pet kit, you also need food and water for them and food dishes so that you can feed it to them. If your dog eats fresh food, you might want to look just for their disaster kit. You might want to look for a shelf-stable fresh food. Just Food for Dogs has one. Portland Pet Food has packets. They don't take up too much space, but you want enough food and water for each of your pets for, again, several days. We talked about the first aid kit. Make sure you grab any medicine that they take. We talked about before, a backup collar, harness, ID tags, and leash in case something happens to their original, or they're just out, you grab them, whatever. A traveling bag, cradle carrier, which we also talked about. Grooming and sanitary items, especially if you have cats, you're going to need to grab a litter box and some litter. Pack that in there. They do have those disposable ones that are fairly easy, that already have litter in them. A photo of each pet with you if possible. That just helps prove to the person that has your pet that it's your pet and they feel good about giving it back to you. It's a very tough thing to have found a pet and you really, really want to make sure that you get it back to their actual owner as opposed to some random person who says it's theirs. So photos of your pet for sure to help people help you find them. But if you have one of them with you, that's even better. Toys and a comfort item, and then their microchip and vaccination information. So when you're gathering all your information for the humans, make sure that you grab their microchip information and get it in there. Another way to prove that they're yours if they're found. And you might need their vaccination information if you end up having to board them somewhere. They're going to want to know that they're vaccinated. Okay, so there's actually not a lot of specific different advice from FEMA for different disaster situations, especially when you're preparing for them. Get your stuff together ahead of time. That's the main thing. All the things we've already talked about. But there is different advice for staying safe during these events because the main concern is extreme temperatures or wind or water. Or things falling on you, an earthquake. So you can download the specific sheets with all the advice for those things at ready.gov if you're interested. They've got everything from tsunamis to cyber attacks. But the one that I do kind of want to point out is winter storms. So winter storms, if your power goes out and you're trying to stay warm, one of the things that tends to happen to people is they end up poisoning themselves with carbon monoxide trying to use heat sources indoors that are not meant to be, and there's no ventilation. So never use a gas stove or barbecue grill or anything like that inside the house because it will build up the carbon monoxide. So you want to try to find another way to stay warm. Okay, so safety skills. There are some things you can do to make yourself safer in any emergency situation. One, learn CPR and first aid. You can also learn pet first aid and CPR. So I'm certified in pet first aid and CPR. I'm actually working with a colleague right now on a first aid course for pets because here I am right now telling you you can take this course and get certified. And I don't have a course that I want to recommend to you because when I took it first, years and years and years and years ago, I took it at the Red Cross, and the Red Cross was doing in-person classes with dog and cat mannequins to practice the CPR on. They don't do that anymore. They do an online course. If you look up Pet First Aid, American Red Cross, it's like a 10-minute slideshow. It's not great. So, there's that, but I don't really recommend it. If you want an in-person, more in-depth class, my current certification is through Vet Tech, Pet Tech. And it's not my favorite. I feel like they haven't updated their information in like 15, 20 years since maybe they developed the course. But so not all of the information is 100% up to date, but it is better than nothing. So until we launch our hopefully better course, those are some options that you can do. But you can also just learn human first aid and CPR, make you feel a little bit better. And there's a lot of crossover. Learn how to shut off your utilities. So we briefly talked about needing a wrench, right? So know where your gas line is and how to turn it off. And if you need a wrench for it, get the wrench. How to turn off your water, how to find your circuit box. And even if you rent, just because you're paying rent instead of mortgage doesn't mean you don't need to turn these things off to save your life in a disaster. So it's certainly nothing I knew how to do when I rented, but you should learn. Especially if you're sheltering in place, you're going to want to know those things. So teach your children what to do if they hear alarms and how and when to call 911, and then check on your emergency plan at least once a year to keep it up to date. So I was yapping for 36 minutes. Just to recap, their questions are, how do you get your emergency alerts, which most people are not going to have a problem with, going to come through your cell phone. What's my shelter plan? What's my evacuation route? What's my family household communication plan? Gathering all that info. And do I need to update my emergency preparedness kit? So you can go to ready.gov to download any of the PDFs, but I have gathered a few of them for you, and we're going to get them into the chat. If you're watching the recording of this, then we just look in the notes. They're all going to be there. They're all going to be downloadable. And good luck. And I really hope none of these things happen to anybody, but I think we can all feel a little bit better if we're prepared. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for coming, guys.